We begin with a Fox News alert. President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Attorney General in the center seat for his confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill. Tough room with harsh critics among those questioning him and protesters also in the room. We will continue to watch together Attorney General nominee Jeff Sessions before the Senate Judiciary Committee. The senator from Alabama actually sits on that panel. And this is day one of what is expected to be a contentious two-day hearing. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Meghan McCain, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy herself, Democratic strategist Julie Roginski, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, incoming White House press secretary and special advisor to the president-elect. Sean Spicer is here. We say you're outnumbered, but mostly you're welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is, it's good to be outnumbered.
You have the greatest socks I think I've ever seen on my couch. Well done.
Those are fabulous.
They're our official GOP socks. You can get them at GOP.com.
Oh, wow. I like it. Very cartoon colory. Very bright.
We're bright.
Yeah, glad to have you. All right. Senator Sessions gave opening remarks when this began just a couple of hours ago. 11 Republicans, 9 Democrats on the panel began questioning him. Critics went after his civil rights record. Senator Dianne Feinstein asked him to respond to a letter signed by 1,400 law professors from 49 states who oppose his nomination. The senator also read some of it. Here that is.
Nothing in Senator Sessions' public life since 1986 has convinced us that he is a different man than the 39-year-old attorney who was deemed too racially insensitive to be a federal district court judge. I want your response to this and answer to the question, how do you intend to put behind you what are strongly felt personal views?
I did everything I was required to do. And the complaints about the voter fraud case and the complaints about the Klan case that I vigorously prosecuted and supported are false. And I do hope this hearing today will show that I conducted myself honorably and properly at that time, and that I am the same person, perhaps wiser and maybe a little better, I hope so, today than I was then.
Other hot-button issues like abortion and gay marriage have also come up this morning. Senator Sessions says he would follow the law in those cases. And this headline, he said if he is confirmed, he will recuse himself from any investigation of the Clinton Foundation or former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's emails. Meanwhile, in an unprecedented move, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey is expected to testify against Sessions tomorrow. It will be the first time in history that a sitting senator will speak out against another sitting senator for a cabinet post during a confirmation hearing. But Sessions does have some high-profile support, as well as from former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, the first African-American woman to serve in that post. She says Sessions will work to ensure that everyone is given the voice that is deserved. Let's start there, Sean. Let's start with the kind of support that Sessions has going into this.
Well, it's interesting. He's got tremendous support from people like Condoleezza Rice. There's a group of black pastors that came out in support of him this morning. But the thing that I find interesting is he did have support from someone like a Cory Booker. Last February, he put forward a bill with other senators to recognize the voting rights marchers in 1965. And Senator Booker took to the floor and said, I'm honored to have partnered with this individual, Senator Sessions, to do this. So it clearly looks like they're more interested in the politics of this than the substance. Senator Sessions has a 30-year record of working hard for all Americans, including African Americans. He led the effort to give Alabama native Rosa Parks the Congressional Gold Medal. He was a leader in the fight to restore the Voting Rights Act for 30 years. This is a guy who has shown by work and deed over the last 30 years his commitment to civil rights, to race relations, and frankly, it's a shame that the Senate is doing this. Earlier, and you mentioned this, that individuals from Code Pink stood up and tried to disrupt the democratic process. I think that Democrats should be held accountable and should be asked, do you think this is appropriate for left-wing groups to come in and interrupt a hearing?
An interesting question, because Senator Graham at one point said that, he was bringing up topics like immigration. He talked in detail about that. And he said, well, look, I'm helping you clear the room of the protesters now, because every time he would bring something up, people would jump up, shout, they'd be escorted out. What about this idea that he is recusing himself from anything having to do with the Hillary Clinton investigation?
Well, I think it's smart. I mean, Senator Sessions as someone who has a long history of understanding the law, both working in the Department of Justice, as a state attorney general, as a U.S. attorney, and he understands where those lines are, and I think that's why he's going to make a phenomenal U.S. attorney.
You know, Megan, as we've watched this, one of the things that has been said as you kind of pull back, you'll get a little commentary, go back into it, is that Sessions is very calm. I mean, you can tell that he was very prepared for this, and Sean, you're nodding at this. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
It was very clear that he has been prepping and training for this for a while. I've actually been really impressed how he's done so far. The protests are wildly distracting, and I don't know who they need to get in control of that room, but I find it really inappropriate. Protests should be done outside at different times, especially by Code Pink. I think people came up dressed like Klan members. It is so inappropriate, and it's just adding to the theatrics of this, which I have such a problem with.
You know, for the entire campaign, myself, Kellyanne Conway, Jason Miller, Hope Hicks, we would get peppered with questions. So-and-so supports Donald Trump. Are you going to denounce them? I mean, it would be like, you know, some random person out in middle America but had written something in high school and they said, does Donald Trump denounce this person? I think the Democrats should be asked, are you going to denounce the tactics of Code Pink at a hearing like this? They need to be held accountable for the tactics on the left the same way that we're apparently held accountable for the tactics of people who have a right-leaning thought.
So it's interesting because I'm looking across the couch at Julie Roginski right now and you're nodding. What's going through your
I'll
head?
denounce it. I mean, I don't speak for the Democrats, Sean, but I think it's inappropriate. Code Pink, by the way, has protested Democrats, and you know this well, as much as they have, maybe not as much, but certainly have fairly often, not just Republicans. I mean, Code Pink is in a league of its own when it comes to protests. So I'll denounce it. I think it's inappropriate, but I will also say this, you know, let's focus on what's important here, not the protest of Code Pink, but of Senator Sessions. You brought up Senator Booker, who I know quite well, actually used to be a client of mine. You know, he's not somebody who is typically somebody who's a firebrand and goes off. And I think his concern is not so much that he partnered with Senator Sessions. I haven't spoken to him, but I assume his concern is not so much that he partnered with Senator Sessions on a resolution honoring somebody from 50, 60 years ago.
The Selma marchers, not just anybody.
Exactly right. But people who were, I think we could all agree, were people who deserve to be recognized, but are from before I was born, certainly from 50 years ago, if not longer. The thing that concerns Democrats, and I assume Senator Booker, is Senator Sessions' not just record on voting rights as a U.S. attorney back in Alabama, but certainly what he believes about voting rights since he's been in the Senate. Sure. Certainly his concern about criminal justice reform, which Senator Booker has been very, very, very outspoken on, something that Senator Sessions does not believe states have a right to do to the extent that the federal government thinks has a right to do, which is a very different thing from the usual states' rights things that Republicans want to support. For example, marijuana, which some states agree should be decriminalized, but he doesn't. Suddenly states' rights is not that important to Senator Sessions when it comes to issues like this. So these are issues that I think concern Democrats. We have a prison to
But
pipe.
I think they should, and I think that the issue should be of concern.
They should.
But the fact of the matter is that Senator Sessions' record and deeds should assure them. I mean, you look at back 30 years ago when he was a U.S. attorney prosecuting Klans members. I think you're absolutely right. You look at his vote and support for the Voting Rights Act to extend it by 30 years. His voting record, his actions as a U.S. attorney, as attorney general back in Alabama, and his votes as a U.S. senator show that he actually is a champion.
What happened to the Republican Party where in 1986 they were so concerned about Senator Sessions that the Republican Senate voted him down? What happened to your party? What you have done over the last 4 years?
I think that's a great question. And you look at someone like Arlen Specter, who was one of the people on that panel that voted no, that before his death said, I regret that vote. I've come to know Jeff Sessions. This was bad. We should have confirmed him then.
That's Arlen Specter.
And I think that you've seen, no, but you're asking a question, and I'm saying that when you talked about the people that back then realized that in a lot of cases they didn't have the full story, they didn't understand the man and his commitment, and since that time he's continued to be, frankly, a champion for civil rights and race relations.
And I would say this, though, Julie, the whole thing started today, obviously, with Senator Grassley, but we heard from Senator Collins saying exactly what you're talking about with regard to Arlen Specter and how that had opened her eyes, and many people in the room had their eyes opened by the fact that he went Democrat, but then he said, you know what, I still support this particular individual based on the man that I've come to know. I want to get on to something else. Senator Chuck Schumer of New York made this statement about some of the confirmation process now being delayed. Let's watch that and talk more. All right, so this is a quote we're going to pop up on the screen, so you're going to hear me say it. We've gone from 6 hearings to 3 on Wednesday, and that is a good process. So many nominees are billionaires and corporate titans with complex financial holdings that raise the possibility of conflicts of interest, which requires careful scrutiny. May have also held views that are diametrically opposed to the president-elect's statements during the campaign, and they have an obligation to tell the American people where they stand now. Your thoughts?
This is the same Chuck Schumer that in 2008, when Republicans controlled the Senate, asked for swift consideration of the nominees. Tim Geithner, who was Treasury Secretary and by no means a poor individual, he urged swift consideration of him because we needed to deal with the financial concerns of the country. I think we would ask for the same standards that Senator Schumer set out in 2008 when he took Senator Obama's. He voted for 42 individuals in the nomination process. He's never concerned too much about the speed at which they've been confirmed. When Obama was first elected in 2008, Republican-controlled Senate approved 7 of them the first day in office and 5 the week after, 13 of them by voice vote. I think we would ask for the same standard Democrats asked for when President Obama was elected.
You know, Kennedy, I think it's fair to ask how much Democrats might be smarting by what Harry Reid did with the threshold for these nominees, particularly in the Senate, with 60 votes going down to 51. That benefited or would have benefited Democrats at the time. Now it's going to flip and benefit the Republicans.
Of course it does, and Senator Reid was warned about that at the time that they adjusted the rules, and this is exactly what happens, and frankly it's exhausting for the American public, and I don't think it's the most important thing right now. I think the most important things we can be talking about, it's not just civil rights. We have to get off that issue at some point. Yes, it's very important, but he's not the Attorney General just of civil rights, but also of civil liberties. And one of my concerns is, you know, I understand that he's had a personal evolution in many areas of his life, but when it comes to marijuana laws and drug reform, it kind of frightens me that someone in that powerful of a position seems like he wants to kickstart a multi-billion-dollar drug war, which is a losing cause in this country. It has cost billions of dollars and millions of lives, and you now see, finally, there is a majority of Americans in this country who believe that marijuana should be legal. And that not only means that, you know, it's a states' rights issue, but also there have to be testing facilities where we can figure out if there is a medicinal benefit to marijuana, and I worry that this Attorney General is opposed to that, and he's not going to be asked the right questions by these senators who are grandstanding like Cory Booker.
Well, I think the president-elect himself has talked about the dangers and perils of drugs and alcohol abuse. It's something that is very personal to him. So I think you're going to find an administration that is going to be very, very careful in this area, because I think there's genuine concerns about whether or not how our country and how our young kids in particular have handled drugs and alcohol, and it's something that we've got to be careful.
I think President-elect Trump has actually been more sympathetic to the rehabilitation process, and I welcome that. He's also said that he supports medicinal marijuana, and I fear that's in diametric opposition to Senator Sessions, who said that he wants to take a much harder prosecutorial line against drug
abuse. I just want to make sure everybody understands, when you come into a Trump administration, it's the Trump agenda that you are implementing, not your own. And I think the Senator Sessions is well aware of that.
Okay. All right. Sean, good to have you.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. The Obama administration is now slapping additional sanctions on 5 more Russians, including a close associate of Russian President Vladimir Putin. This ahead of what is expected to be a contentious hearing tomorrow on Capitol Hill on Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson's ties to Putin. So we've got that going on. And of course, we're watching today the very first one to tip off this week with Jeffrey Sessions of Alabama. We'll continue to let you know the headlines coming out of that. Also tomorrow, President-elect Trump is set for his first formal news conference since July. Sean's going to be quite busy, I think. It comes amid questions about Mr. Trump appointing his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as a senior White House advisor. We'll get the incoming White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer's reaction to all of this. I love talking about you like you're not sitting right next to me. We're coming right back. All right, so we are continuing to watch the confirmation hearing of Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama for Attorney General. And you see there on the left of your screen is Senator Mike Lee of Utah. And so they are going back and forth right now. We will monitor this and bring you the headlines as we always do from this, but we have a special guest on set, incoming White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, right on time, right before the news conference tomorrow. So let's get to it. Megan?
All right, with less than 2 weeks left in office, President Obama has has slapped sanctions on 5 more Russians for alleged human rights abuses, including a close associate of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Also, Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham planning to release a bipartisan bill today to increase sanctions on Russia over its meddling in the U.S. election. The bill puts congressional Republicans in a tough spot as President-elect Donald Trump has said he wants to forge a better relationship with Russia. And this all comes as Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson is set to be grilled at his confirmation hearing tomorrow over his ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin while he ran ExxonMobil. But one top senator says he believes Tillerson understands the dangers Russia poses. Watch.
I don't think his views on Russia are out of the mainstream. I think he understands how nefarious they have been, the problems they've created in Ukraine and Crimea, what they've been doing in the Baltics, what they've done to destabilize Europe, stepping into the vacuum in Russia and supporting Assad. I believe, and of course he can answer for himself tomorrow, is already thinking about how he's going to push back against Putin, knowing well how Putin operates and how he responds to pressure of different kinds.
Mr. Spicer, I want to go to you first. I am really looking forward to the hearings tomorrow. I'm really fascinated to see how it goes. Can you tell me what I can possibly expect? Give us a little inside information.
Well, I can tell you that this cabinet is literally the all-star cabinet of cabinets. Someone like Rex Tillerson, I think once the American people and some of the senators at the hearing get to hear him in public, they're going to be unbelievably impressed. The president-elect chose these individuals because they're unbelievably successful and they're going to be able to implement an agenda that's going to put the country first. I've had an opportunity to get to talk to some of these folks like Rex Tillerson, and their stories, both personally and professionally, are amazing. They are so qualified to do this, and the sacrifices like the president-elect that they're doing to set aside some of the success that they could continue to have to serve this country is amazing. I mean, each one of these individuals in the cabinet is in some way achieved a new height in their career, and yet they want to be part of a Trump-Pence administration and help the country move forward. And I think you can continue to see this infectious desire that spreads throughout the country, frankly, of people who want to see the president succeed and want to see this country succeed.
You know, Rex Tillerson doesn't have a lot of public speaking because obviously he was a businessman his entire life. So part of the issue I have with him is like, I just don't know that much.
Yeah, and I think the hearing, you're going to be overwhelmed by his grasp of the issue. When you think a company like Exxon, and I think most people come to mind and say, okay, it's an oil and gas company, but you think about the number of countries they do business in and what they do when they go into a country. He has forged relationships with leaders over the past 3 decades, some of them maybe early in their career, so that over 30 years he's developed a personal relationship where he understands not only the business interest of a particular country, but their culture, and forged a personal relationship with some of these leaders that he can hit the ground on day one and now fight for America's interests.
Well, you know, a few years ago, the United States passed the Magnitsky Act, which is a bipartisan effort to punish Vladimir Putin's inner circle for essentially killing and assassinating journalists and others who disagree with him. Then Putin invaded Crimea, took part of Ukraine, annexed it to Russia. And then finally we have a consensus in the international community, and not just among the intelligence community, but also among a bipartisan group of elected officials, including Senators McCain, Senators Graham, that the Russians interfered in our election. So can you commit now, on behalf of the administration, that you will not be lifting sanctions that are placed on Russia?
I can't commit anything. I think the president of the United States, or the president-elect, once he assumes office, he's going to do what's in the best interest of this country.
So you're open to that?
No, it's not a question of being open to it. I think prejudging what the president-elect is going to do when he gets into office and is afforded the intelligence and insight and guidance.
Hasn't he had it? Hasn't he had his intelligence
He's had an intelligence briefing, but I think to sit down with the national security team and the other relevant agencies, the Defense Department, the State Department, and advise about what the situation is at the time and what the best course of action is. Maybe we have more covert than overt sanctions. Maybe we have less. But at the end of the day, what's important, Julie, is that the United States have a relationship with Russia. The Obama administration came in 2008 hoping to reset relations. They brought a button over that was misspelled, and from the get-go screwed up the reset that they sought to have. I think this president understands that you've got China and Russia growing in terms of power in this world, and it's in America's interest to have a relationship with both of these countries, and letting them grow unchecked is not in any way.
Would you acknowledge that the Russians hacked the RNC as well, or attempted to?
Well, they attempted to, absolutely, and the president-elect said it in the statement. And Russia, China, and other organizations have been trying for decades.
And you're saying that despite the fact that they hacked the RNC, they didn't.
No, they didn't hack the RNC.
Oh, they didn't. So the international.
No, he said they didn't hack the RNC. They tried to. I think we had the appropriate defenses, and the FBI's acknowledged.
So the intelligence community disagrees with you.
No, they don't. No, hold on. With all due respect, no.
The intelligence community warned both the DNC and the RNC that there were nefarious actors. No, that's actually not.
No, they did, but what you're saying is incorrect.
They warned both of them.
With all due respect, I've met with the intelligence community. No, that's not true. They tried to get into both. They were denied at the RNC, and frankly, we stopped them at the gate. Then we met with the FBI, answered the call, and continued to work with them to prevent any.
So you're not worried they have anything on you or Reince Priebus or anybody else that they may have in their back pocket because you don't believe?
Can we get back to Russia for just 1 second? Because I want to know, like, what is...
But no, I'm not.
But can I just interject?
I just want to ask one question. What is our policy in regards to Russia? Because it seems like we have two vastly different things going on. You have a potential Secretary of State, and I tend to agree with him, because I think when you have prosperity and peace, and it starts with America, it spreads across the globe. I don't disagree with that or that philosophy. But you have a group of senators and, this bipartisan effort to really thwart Russia's, dissemination of fake news, whatever you want to call it, any way they tried to enter into our election. And then you have Rex Tillerson, who's taking a more peaceful approach. These seem at times to be diametrically opposed. What is the incoming administration's policy on Russia?
The incoming administration's policy on Russia is where we can align our interests. We will. I think it's something that Hillary Clinton talked about, that if we can be an ally to Russia in a certain shared interest, whether it's fighting ISIS or putting America's interests first in terms of economic development, we're going to do it. Our safety and prosperity should come first. And in the case of any country that wants to partner with us to further that goal, we should be willing to do it. But right now, having Russia as an adversary, whether it's economically or diplomatically, doesn't benefit the country. And I think that what we need to do, and where there's not only a bipartisan, but all of our party, and frankly most Democrats should agree too, is that it's in our nation's interest to have a healthy and robust relationship with Russia and other countries.
Will Tillerson be tough enough?
Bring it back real quickly.
I will tell you this, Rex Tillerson is one tough guy, and he will make sure, the same way that he fought for Exxon, he's going to fight for this country.
What about those Exxon sanctions?
Can I just please let me speak? I would like to say that I obviously am my father's daughter. I have my concerns, but I think we all as Americans need to go in tomorrow with a completely open mind and hear this man out for the good of America.
As much information as we possibly can. So I want to bring it real quickly back full circle to Rex Tillerson and what specifically he adds to this, because he did get a friendship award that was for commerce, Julie, because I know you're going to interject, from Russia, but just to try to understand what he brings to the table per the president-elect.
Well, again, I think you look at over 3 decades, the relationship and success he's had around the globe. There's no question that when it comes to being a tough negotiator and a successful businessman, he's hit the nail on the head. And I think what the president-elect recognized in him is that if he can put those talents, skills, and relationships to benefit for the country, it's a huge win. It's not about how much time you spent in government. He's got long-standing relationships with these individuals. He knows how to implement a successful agenda and win. And I think that's what the president-elect sees in him, and that's what the country's going to gain from his tenure as Secretary of State.
It's certainly going to be must-see TV for all of Americans tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it.
C-SPAN ratings are going to jump up.
All right, Democrats holding a late-night protest against GOP efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare, but one top Republican says they're more concerned with messaging than actually improving the health care law. That debate next, plus questions over the president-elect's appointment of his son-in-law as a senior White House advisor. Is there a conflict here? And what about the optics? We'll ask Sean Spicer. He's here for the entire hour. We're continuing to watch the confirmation hearing of Senator Jeff Sessions. That is Senator Amy Klobuchar speaking at the moment. We will keep you updated throughout the hour on what happens and continues to go forward. Interesting, fascinating. I can't wait to see.
Absolutely. Well, we are 1 day away from President-elect Donald Trump's highly anticipated news conference, and tomorrow Mr. Trump is scheduled to hold his first formal question and answer session since July. It comes as his transition team announces his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has been appointed as senior advisor to the president. And though critics are now citing federal anti-nepotism laws, Kushner's lawyer says those laws do not apply in this case, and many legal minds say they agree. All right, let's first start with what the video was, and that was the pop-up impromptu news conference that we saw yesterday, kind of at the tower. So now we've got the big one coming up.
Big one's coming. But he's been talking to the press since he got elected. He's gone out several times to talk to the pool. He had to sit down with the New York Times. He was at Condé Nast. I mean, this notion that he's not been out there is a little exaggerated, because he goes down fairly regularly and talks to the press corps at Trump Tower. He talked to him at Mar-a-Lago, at Bedminster.
Yeah, we saw that on New Year's Eve. He came out and answered some questions about Obamacare.
He's been actually extremely accessible, but tomorrow is sort of the big one that a lot of the folks have been anticipating.
So what do you think the president-elect will say about Jared Kushner?
Well, I think he's going to. Well, the Jared piece was handled yesterday and very well. I mean, Jared is someone.
But more questions to come.
No, I'm
about
sure
that.
there'll be plenty of questions. But I think Jared is someone that he has spoken about with not just Jared, but his entire family, and how much their opinion matters to him, and their input and concerns. Jared's been hugely important during the campaign, not just in business but in politics, giving his father-in-law advice, working with the senior staff, and I think he's going to be a huge asset to not just this president but this country through his roles and connections down in Washington, D.C. And you look at the steps that Jared took yesterday, stepping down from a hugely successful company.
And his wife.
Same with Ivanka.
And divesting from a lot of other things and complying with rules that an employee would have to come, even though he's not taking a salary. That's another sort of interesting point. There's so many of these individuals that their desire to serve the president-elect, implement his agenda, and serve this country have foregone any salary or anything. They truly are excited to help this country move forward.
And what is it about his background, his resume, that makes him particularly an adept person on Israel and the Middle East?
Well, I think
because I know that's where, as a senior advisor, that's where he's going to.
And you look at the number of people who have spoken out, from Bill de Blasio, the mayor here, to Prime Minister Netanyahu, to other leaders in the diplomatic community, the business community. Jared is someone who has gotten a high level of praise and respect from across the board, because I think he has a really keen understanding of the concerns that this country faces, not just in business but in foreign policy.
But where does his expertise in the Middle East and Israel come from?
From his time in Israel, from his faith, and from his connections, frankly. I think he has worked with AIPAC and a lot of other groups and a lot of other leaders in the Israeli community, in the Jewish faith community, to try to figure out ways to help foster our relationship as a country with Israel, but also to help try to solve Middle East peace and to bring productive and constructive ideas to the table to key leaders in this process.
Well, so timely, too, with what's gone on with the United Nations and Israel really needing to know how much we support them as a nation.
I think that's going to be, the interesting here is it's not just Israel. The president-elect's taken almost 100 phone calls from foreign leaders that it's a breath of fresh air to them. And they say to him on the phone, Mr. President-elect, we're excited that you're taking office. We haven't had a relationship with the United States in a few years. We're excited that you want to work with us. And so there's a genuine excitement, not just in this country, but around the world. You see these world leaders calling him and telling him how excited they are.
Well, we know he's going to talk with Theresa May.
Right.
Yeah. So
will there be any new trade agreements with Britain in light of the Brexit vote?
I think that you've seen Minister Johnson come out. He was here this week, and there's going to be a discussion about whether or not we can work with Britain to establish a bilateral trade agreement. But again, it's this excitement that exists, whether you're talking about Britain or Russia or any of these numerous countries that are excited that they have an opportunity to reset relations with the United States and to reassert America's place in the world.
All right. Well, one thing that we've talked about on the couch, Megan, has to do with what the press corps is going to look like going forward. Yeah. You know, you guys made people nervous when you said you were going to move around the seats and that sort of thing.
They should.
But there's a seriousness about the traditionality that we've seen there. So what will it potentially look like?
Well, it's a combination, and I don't think it's being made in a vacuum. We've sat down with the White House Correspondents Association, with other reporters, and said it's the same charge, frankly, the president-elect has given everybody who's serving in either a staff role or a appointed role, which is, can we deliver a better product for the American people? Can we do things better and smarter? And I think that's what we've done in the press shop, at least, is talk to reporters and other stakeholders, figured out, can we bring more people into the process? Is it just Washington media that should get access to the press room? Can we find ways using modern technology to bring people who might have a weekly newspaper in Idaho into the process? Can we bring a talk radio show host?
Or millennials.
Exactly, or everyday Americans. But I think for too often the mindset has just been, this is how it's always been done. And I think there's a level of innovation that needs to be brought to all of government.
Daily briefings?
Sure. Absolutely, but it's a question of, do they all need to be televised? Do they all need to be in a particular place? And again, this is a decision that we can have with the press corps. Is there a way, instead of just having 49 seats in the press corps, can we expand the ability to bring more Americans into the process, either by technology or a bigger space or what have you? But there are discussions that should have, and to respect some of the traditions that have occurred, but also to make sure that we're updating it with technology.
All right, some different voices among that press corps is what I'm hearing you say. Democrats are fighting tooth and nail to keep Obamacare intact and staying up very late at night, particularly last night with some fiery floor speeches. We'll ask Sean what will happen to President Obama's signature health care law when his boss takes office. Fewer than 2 weeks away from today. That's a big smile on your face. We're coming back. Well, it has been information spilled with Senator Jeffrey Sessions there of Alabama on the floor of, not the floor, but at the center of this hearing for his confirmation as Attorney General. And so we've seen all sorts of information come with questions asked, so on and so forth, and we're continuing to watch that. We can tell you that just moments ago the announcement came that they will be wrapping up for a break in about 15 minutes. So we are continuing to monitor this for the headlines that come out. We've talked about some of them this hour. We'll continue to do so and then anticipate a break atop the hour. Kennedy?
All right, if you see some bleary-eyed Democrats, it's because they were holding a late-night protest on the Senate floor. Such partiers. They're trying to derail Republican efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. They broadcast the whole thing on Facebook Live, part of an effort to portray the repeal effort as reckless. Here's Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts.
What's the first thing on the Republican agenda now that they're in control? Is it working to help improve health care in America, working to bring down premiums and deductibles, making fixes to expand the network of doctors and the number of plans that people can choose from? Any of those? Nope. The very first thing on the Republican agenda in the 115th Congress is to shatter health care in America.
Or to actually make it affordable, Liz. But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell accused Democrats of failing to acknowledge the problems with Obamacare, which have led to big premium and deductible spikes and fewer insurance options.
Unfortunately, there are some who will never accept the realities of this failed partisan law. They seem more interested in messaging exercises than replacing Obamacare with real solutions to improve health care. Our nation cannot continue on this trajectory as Obamacare continues to unravel at every level, leaving Americans to pick up the pieces.
But some Republicans are getting nervous about repealing Obamacare because they don't know what the replacement bill will look like, and they're concerned it could drive up the deficit. So we are in quite a pickle here because obviously Obamacare has failed. You're seeing that, and a majority of Americans feel the exact same way. Do the Republicans have a solid plan right now to replace it along with a repeal?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of plans out there that have been put forward. What we've got to do.
Do they have a solid
plan? But part of this is doing it right, Kennedy. I think you saw what the Democrats, when they did it, they jammed it through. Nancy Pelosi told us you can read the bill after we pass it. And look what happened. Not only did the costs go up, but people lost access to plans and doctors. And I think to do this right is what's important. And I think that's what the Republicans are committed to doing. You've got Rand Paul and Tom Cotton going out there and talking about their part of the plan, Speaker Paul Ryan. But I think if you look at some of the proposals that Dr. Tom Price, who's going to be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services, have put forward to allow more competition, to give more access to folks, that's where we're headed. And I think, frankly, the interesting thing is it will end up being more about what the bumper sticker for Obamacare was in the first place, which is it will have increased accessibility and lower costs. But if you do this right, you can actually achieve that.
One of the issues that is constantly brought up is messaging, and that seems to be what Democrats are focusing on now, as opposed to making sure that this most personal issue is taken care of for Americans, particularly sick and poor people who don't necessarily have an advocate on their behalf. So when Democrats go out, when the law is repealed, and they start bringing up examples of people who've lost their insurance, people who are sick and on waiting lists, how are Republicans going to counter that?
Well, remember, they're losing their insurance now. There's too many times when you're walking in and your doctor tells you we no longer accept the plan that you had, or frankly, you find out the plan that you had is no longer available anymore in your state. So I think if the Democrats want to hang their hat on Obamacare, they're going to continue to see the results that they did in November get magnified. I think this is the idea that this is the message they took from November. I think as a Republican is pretty reassuring. But I think at some point they've got to recognize that part of the problem is that premiums have spiked, people's doctors and plans are no longer there what they used to be, and it's exactly the opposite of what they were promised. So I think the difference is that when people start to see the Republican plan do the exact opposite, which is the cost goes down, the premiums aren't spiking, and that you're allowed to choose more plans that have the doctors that you want to go to are in it. I think that's going to be a
is the replacement plan the price plan? Because the price plan's been on the table for many years now.
I think it's the price plan, part of the price plan, and then they're working with Rand Paul, Tom Cotton, Speaker Paul Ryan, and others, because right now we've got to get this thing right, and we want to actually get more people involved in the process and do it right, as opposed to what Democrats did it last time, which is jam it down the American
But all the people that you mentioned have been in Congress for a very long time.
Sure.
And the question is, why didn't they pass a replacement bill a long time ago so that we would know?
We have put forward replacement.
But we've never passed it. Congress, so the House and the Senate have been controlled.
When Obamacare passed, we didn't have the majority.
But now you've had it for many years. Why not pass it?
We haven't, as of January 20th, in 10 days, we'll finally have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican president.
You repealed Obamacare, I don't know how many times. 62 times, right, without having a Republican president. So in the same way...
But it never passed.
But in the same vein, you could have absolutely passed a replacement bill without a Republican president.
Well,
and then have that on the
gone?
It would have given us an idea of what the Republicans actually want to replace Obamacare with.
Why didn't the Democrats do that? I mean, just last week, President Obama didn't say, let's help them come up with a bill for the American people that we can live with, who cares what it's called. He said, quote, don't rescue the Republicans. That's not helpful.
I'll answer the question. The Democrats did their part. They passed a health care bill. You may not like it, but they passed the bill. Now, my question for the Republicans is, why didn't they pass a replacement?
But they knew that there were problems
But let's talk about what we're going to do moving forward.
I agree. I'd love to know what it is.
Because I don't want to see Democrats just be obstructionists and don't hold on to something for the sake of holding on to it, because that status quo is
not what I'm suggesting. I would like to know, before they repeal this bill, what they're replacing it with. Right now, I'm hearing about replace and delay.
I'd like to know what Democrats would do to be helpful in this whole process. I think that's
we have to roll on, because the steamroller is not going to stop, and we have to get some tough questions expected today on Capitol Hill over President-elect Trump's plans to build a border wall and have Mexico pay for it. Mr. Trump's choice to lead Homeland Security set for his confirmation hearing. So how will the new administration's plans for immigration play out? That discussion is coming up right here.
Another one of President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks will be on the hot seat later today. Retired Marine Major General John Kelly, tapped to lead the Department of Homeland Security, will appear for his confirmation hearing this afternoon. He's expected to be easily confirmed, but will likely be pressed about Mr. Trump's plan to build a border wall and other steps to boost security. Last night, Trump team senior advisor Kellyanne Conway saying the plan to build the wall is still on track, even amid questions over funding. Watch.
The president-elect made clear last week, Sean, that maybe Congress will pay for it first to speed up the process. But the full intent and plan is to then have Mexico reimburse us for it. This is the way the appropriations process goes. Anybody who says anything differently is lying and is doing so for political reasons.
Mr. Spicer, if Mexico doesn't end up paying for the wall in its entirety, do you think you're going to have some angry supporters?
It's possible, but I think Mr. Trump's been very clear that he's a man of his word and he gets things done. So I think he's going to do it. Mexico's going to pay for it, and everyone will be happy. But look, I think you mentioned at the outset General John Kelly testifying today. This is a guy who ran Southern Command. He understands the drugs, the trafficking that is going on at our southern border, not just coming up from Mexico, but other areas where people are using that southern border to come in other ways. And we need somebody who is solely focused and understands the problem that the country faces in terms of immigration, its economic impact, the human trafficking impact that we're having. And there's no one better than General John Kelly to take on that task.
How's Mexico going to pay for it? Remissions? Or
there's a lot of ways. I mean, you can look at tariffs and user fees and remissions. I mean, there's other ways that can be done, and I think part of this is to work with Congress and figure out a way, frankly, work with the Mexican government to figure out a way to make it happen. But there's also companies, remember, one of the things that the President-elect has talked about is companies that are moving out of this country and then going to a place with cheaper labor and trying to sell back at the expense of American workers those products. And I think there's a way that you can utilize some of those taxes and tariffs to help fund this as well. I'm not going to get in front of the president-elect on this and his team in terms of the policy aspects of it, but I think there's a lot of mechanisms by which you could actually seek that.
So you're doubling down potentially in a tariff war between us and Mexico and other
No, I'm not doubling down, because one of the things that I think he's been very clear on is that if you choose to stay in this country, that tariff doesn't exist. That tax doesn't exist. If you continue to stay here in America and put American workers first, you're going to be fine. I think what he's concerned about is people using the tax benefit of another country to disadvantage American workers and then sell back to the American consumer.
So it doesn't sound to me like Mexico is paying for the wall. It sounds to me like
No,
or somebody's paying for the wall.
I was dovetailing into the broader thing, but I think there's a lot of mechanisms that can be used to be the funding mechanism.
Well, one of the things that the president-elect even has talked about is the fact that you would reimburse on a situation. You'd pay for what you need, and then through all those different avenues get reimbursed. And so there was never this sort of upfront cost that we anticipated that there would be anyway paid by Mexico. So I think that's been pretty clear all
on October
along.
22nd, for folks in the mainstream media who are trying to say that he's backing away for something, on October 22nd, he made it very clear that this is the way that the appropriations process works, and he would work through that and then seek the reimbursement.
He also talked about the trade deficit.
Right.
And the trade deficit we have, with Mexico particularly, but China as well. So is there a way of reworking that to have a more favorable balance for America?
Well, sure. I mean, when you look at the regulatory and tax impact that a lot of our countries face, a lot of our companies face, which is why they're moving. And if you can establish a more favorable tax and regulatory climate here in the United States, grow the manufacturing base here, that by nature reduces the trade deficit.
Okay.
All right, we got to take a quick break. More Outnumbered in just a moment.
Thank you to Sean Spicer. And so we're on the eve of the first big news conference.
We are.
Of
Thank you guys for
2017.
having me.
You excited?
I am. I'm very excited about a whole host of things. Real change is coming.
All
It's
right.
got to get you excited.
I Instagrammed your socks, by the way. They're
Thank you.
fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Get
being
some
here.
followers out of that.
All right, there you go. All right, well, that's going to do it for us. We'll see you tomorrow at noon Eastern right here with More Outnumbered. But for now, happening now.